And then welcome everybody to this very new time slot that we're going to do twice a week, but more reliably than our previous attempts at a daily afternoon show because we were both so busy. This is the Trump Tyranny Tracker Live. And what we've done for 267 days is really recap every bit of authoritarian grab that the Trump administration has been doing day by day. Olga Lautman has been running the Trump Tyranny Tracker with so much efficiency, and it's so accurate and it's so detailed. If you do not yet subscribe to her amazing Substack, you're missing out on the most detailed, I think it's the most detailed available look at every single bit of authoritarian grab the Trump administration has done since it started its, this current administration and the previous one too, right? You did the previous one. So, everyone needs to subscribe to Olga. You have to subscribe to the Trump Tyranny Tracker. She's got another thing that she does called Unmasking Russia. Both of those are important, but the Trump Tyranny Tracker is what we do here. It's a live version, a video version of yesterday's big tracker items from her Substack. Did I do that justice?
Thank you. A lot of justice. Yeah, no, it definitely is a good way. I'm a documenter and, I document everything that is going on to look for patterns. And this tracker, definitely, I mean, there's like 30 plus news items per day affecting all different, aspects of authoritarianism to see how far along we're getting and to, unfortunately, with the failure in media, like 90% of this gets slipped under the radar. That's why I think it's so important to document this. And that way, at least one day we can look back if we regain this country, look back through it. And I mean, it will definitely be a good roadmap to see one, all the tactics, and two, how to prosecute these people for their lawlessness.
I wanted to ask you, but before I do that, let me remind everyone, Tuesdays and Thursdays, 7 p.m., this is where you find us, and we'll do this twice a week, and we'll maybe more if we find we need it. But Olga, when we did this series on authoritarianism, you had mentioned during the series that there was a threshold for the number of people that needed to show up for protest that was considered a success amongst protest movements against authoritarian states. What was that threshold figure?
Usually it's about 4 or 5% of the population. The problem is it's not for a protest, it's for sustained protest.
Okay.
So it's not just people showing up, once every month or 2 months. I mean, this has to be sustained protest, whether it's daily protest or weekly protest, as long as they're sustained. And again, the protests have to have a purpose. I mean, you have to have strategy behind the protest. You have to have demands that you want met. And I mean, these demands are why you come out. And then when these demands get met, you move on to the next series of issues. I mean, I can tell you in Ukraine, 2 revolutions, and it was a sustained protest. Daily, people took it as a civic duty. They would go to work or do whatever they had, but sign up to a few hours shift every single day, and you constantly had people rotating every single day. I mean,
At the same location.
yeah, in Maidan. And Maidan Square is Freedom Square. And every single day. And it wasn't just Maidan. I mean, these were protests across the whole country. Everything was organized. That was the central location that people focused on. You had upwards of 1 million people on some nights. And I mean, people just didn't leave until the demands were met. And that's it. And it resulted in the treasonous former president fleeing to Russia for being a collaborator for Russia. And that's it. But that's how it needs to be done. There has to be strategy, and it
So
has
this
to be sustained, and it has to be, constant, and with social media. Like, you have to have a whole strategy surrounding.
the whole protest. So this Saturday, no King's Day, they're expecting more than 5 million people. Maybe double that. It could be. That would be approaching that number you're talking about. But it's got to be sustained, is what you're saying. It can't just be a one-day thing. This means people just have to go and stay in order to make this work. Really, to hang on to this.
Yeah, I mean, the point of sustained protest, why they are successful, is because You have your demands. You don't leave until the regime delivers these demands. And you pick a symbolic place and you have to stay there and show up every day. And again, it's not that you have to give up your work or school or kids or everything. You work around the clock in teams and have, these people sign up for the morning shift, these people are the afternoon shift, these people are the night shift, and just keep doing this every single day. So you need, and 5 million. In our case, it would be what, about not 10 million
Yeah, probably 10.
countrywide. Um, but you know, my main point is it has to be consistent.
And probably one location makes a lot more sense than multiple locations.
Or no, or
No?
symbolic,
Okay.
because you could pick, for instance, if you want to go against, press freedom, then you pick courthouses in local towns, and cities, then this is your symbol, courts. If you want to, like, to protect the First Amendment, if you want to go against the atrocities and the lawlessness of ICE, then you pick, maybe a police station, not right in front of them, not to get arrested, but across the street safely from a police station to show the symbolic meaning of law enforcement. And this is what you're protesting against. So whatever it is that you're protesting, you pick something that's available in every single city, town, across the states, and then use that as your symbol for the movement.
Thank you for that. Let's get into the Trump tyranny tracker then for today, day 267 in the Trump administration. After a Gaza summit in Egypt, Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto, I think I'm saying it correctly, but I'm not sure, was caught on a hot microphone asking Trump to arrange a meeting with his son, Eric, an executive of the Trump organization. Trump immediately agreed, saying, "I'll have Eric call you." Despite the Trump's family's ongoing and substantial business interests in Indonesia, this is the clearest example yet of foreign leaders understanding that access to presidential influence runs directly through the Trump business empire. It's so clear in this particular instance that this is the way they operate.
Yeah, I mean, it's, we see the corruption. He's not hiding the corruption, but here, to be caught on a hot mic where he's there, for ending, well, for the release of the hostages. Let's
Mhm.
leave it at that, because the hostages did get released. He's there for this purpose, and and here you have a foreign leader coming up and saying, "Oh, I want to talk to your son," with Trump organization. Interestingly enough, I cannot remember all the details, and normally I am a Wikipedia, but I remember investigating the Trump property in Indonesia, and one of the business partners was working with ISIS at that time. So it would be interesting if it's still the same group of people that are involved, or if this is a different project. And I remember, shaking my head, like, for all that Trump rails against ISIS, his partners, there are connected to ISIS. Same thing in Baku, for everything that Trump railed about Iran and blamed Obama and Biden and everybody, with Iran. His partners in Baku were, connected to the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. So,
He's connected to all sorts of unsavory people around the world, or groups around the
oh,
people around the world. But this time, it's so different. The corruption is so brazen that maybe it's a hot mic moment, but no one really cares. It's just, they want a meeting with Eric. He's going to set up a meeting with Eric, and it's out in the open. The corruption is there for everyone to see. So it's less shocking in some ways, even though it is more shocking.
well, this is the thing with Trump. He used this strategy, unlike other dictators, because most of the dictators, carry out their ambitions and their moves behind the scenes so people don't really feel it. With him, he normalized, you know, criminal activity from going from 16 and 15. He normalized criminal activity by carrying it out in the open. So whether it was meeting with Russian agents during the 2016 election, whether it was his, campaign manager handing over our voter polls data to a Russian intelligence officer, Kalimnik. Whatever it was done in the open. And then, he came with the approach when you questioned him, fake news, this is a lie, this is a witch hunt, and deflected in this way. And, for a lot of people, especially the media, I mean, normally people are trained that if you commit crimes, someone's committing a crime, you don't publicly do it. And that's why I think it took a very long time. I mean, some in the media still haven't caught on, but I think it took a very long time for people to realize, that just because it's being carried out publicly doesn't mean that it's not a criminal act. And now, the second time around, he's just brazen. And I mean, he frankly is unstoppable. No one's stopping him. So, now he's not even bothering, and the media doesn't even cover these things. I mean, they're stuck on God knows what nonsense, when we actually have real things that matter.
Gene in our chat very astutely says that, SCOTUS gave him permission to commit felonies right on camera. So that's why he's doing it. And in fact, that's exactly what they did. He's got complete immunity. To our second story now, to the Pentagon's assault on press freedom. The New York Times, the Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, and CNN, and also Fox News, would you believe,
I know,
have all rejected a new Pentagon policy that would restrict journalists' contact with military sources. Under rules pushed by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, media outlets that refuse to sign this agreement will lose press badges and office access. The policy warns of adverse consequences for military personnel who speak to journalists without authorization, language that press freedom advocates are calling an unconstitutional act. Well, this is just, unbelievable, but there it is. They're doing exactly what they're saying they're doing. They're stopping the state media from reporting on what's going on in the Pentagon. But this time, the media is pushing back.
It's very interesting because I put this in my tracker last night, and then today, which I'm going to have to do a separate entry, Fox News signed on to this statement. And it's interesting to see that they are pushing back, because here you have a situation where you have a lawless Pentagon. You have Hegseth, who's the so-called defense secretary. I mean, to me, he's still, a drunk Fox News host, and he's shown this all along, the way since he's held this position, who really, use signal to plan out an operation in the Middle East. And here you had the press investigating, rightfully so, because, I mean, this is classified information being transferred via an unsecure, I mean, signal is, secure for us, but not if you are the Department, of
Defense, yeah.
Yeah, or whatever it's called now.
War departments.
And for them, they have proper procedures. Anyone else who would have done this in any normal world would be, court-martialed. And here you have him now shutting down the press access, and at the same time you have them, carrying out these extrajudicial killings. Before we went on a few hours ago, Trump announced that, they bombed another boat. I mean, you have most likely fishermen, because I could tell you that, narcotics, drug traffickers are not going to be running boats if they know that, U.S. ships are bombing boats.
Yeah.
Fishermen will be, because this is their livelihood. I mean, Venezuela is a very poor country. If you need to do your job, you need to work. So we have no evidence of who they're bombing, what they're bombing. There's no congressional approval. And people have been asking questions, including Republican and Democratic senators and Congress people. And here, you have him now shutting access to that. And I believe at 5:00, whoever did not sign this agreement lost their press badge and will now have to stand outside of the Pentagon to report on what is happening with the Pentagon.
There's only one organization that signed on, OAN, as far as I know. for right now, which, says a lot about OAN. But, Hegseth, next time he stands
Russia
in front
needs
of...
their access.
I suppose Sputnik will get one too, or who knows who else. But, every time he stares out into the press gallery there at the Pentagon, he's going to be seeing one reporter right now. That's not a good look for any war secretary or defense secretary. And yet he's put himself in this position where he's going to get zero coverage.
But the thing is that he's not looking for coverage, and trust me, they'll find a bunch of bloggers and influencers,
Yeah.
to fill these positions. And basically, I mean, what their goal is, whether it's the White House or the State Department or any agency that gets covered, their goal is basically to have a very similar system like in Russia, where all questions are screened, everyone who's standing inside is screened, and everything is an orchestrated theater. So no one asks anything that shouldn't be asked. Sometimes people are delivered questions in Russia, like, here, can you make sure to ask about this? And that's it. And this is what they're trying to do, is create this, state propaganda machine, and it's starting there. And at the same time, they're putting pressure on the press, going after the press, putting lawsuits against media outlets. So you see how they're trying to reshape the way information is received in this country.
And they were so critical of the so-called woke movement, and yet here they are doing exactly the same, organized, restricted, flow of information and cancellations. It's really very, very ironic that they're doing this. The judiciary is fracturing. Dozens of federal judges told the New York Times that the Supreme Court's secretive emergency rulings, its so-called shadow docket, have created confusion and eroded public trust. 65 judges were surveyed, 47 criticized how the court had been handling emergency applications on Trump administration policies. These rulings, issued without oral arguments or full public explanation, have repeatedly upheld Trump's actions on immigration, spending, and mass federal firings. Lower court judges are essentially saying they can no longer understand or predict how the nation's highest court will rule. This is quite something to have these judges, even anonymously, go up against the Supreme Court.
Yeah, and what the Supreme Court, frankly, is doing is extremely dangerous. The fact that they're allowing this shadow dockets to go through, to authorize, I mean, everything, to the point that they authorized, racial profiling on steroids.
Yeah.
Literally, can we poll over brown people? Yes, you can, until we have a hearing on this. So they're giving an okay, to Trump's regime to do basically whatever. And here you have these judges, who are the front line pushing back, trying to stop this insanity and trying to be a check on, this sociopath's power, and then they're getting undermined by the Supreme Court, especially that they're not giving an explanation, because that's not normal for the Supreme Court. They normally hear something, and then they will, come in, weigh in, and write out explanations, who voted how. Here, I mean, these really are shadow dockets being run in secret. We don't know what is happening. We don't know why. And it's literally every week, or they're approving one or two of his actions. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, this is not how the Supreme Court is supposed to run.
Now, they've defended the use, at least one of the justices has, but clearly this is much, much, much more use of the shadow docket than ever before. And it really is pushing through a lot of emergency policy decisions at a time when we are already going through an emergency. The Trump administration is an emergency. So not to have the sober thought that we need for every single policy and then just pushing stuff through really raises questions about the Supreme Court.
I should look up, how many of these shadow dockets happened prior to Trump. It's probably one every few years versus now that it's like, 3, 4, 5 per month. So, I mean, they really have allowed this practice to happen, something that was completely rare. This is not normal.
Yeah, and they complain about an auto pen. I mean, this is something completely different. Speaker Mike Johnson has labeled the planned No Kings rally a demonstration explicitly organized to protest Trump's authoritarian governance as a hate America and pro-Hamas gathering. This protest is about opposing presidential overreach and defending constitutional limits on executive power. Johnson's characterization represents a deliberate attempt to redefine constitutional dissent as anti-American extremism and even terrorism support. I mean, pro-Hamas, that's ridiculous.
It is very ridiculous, but the reason that I included it, because it's important to document, it's not now coming out of just Stephen Miller or Trump. This is now going through, I mean, today or yesterday, the transportation secretary, Duffy, said the same exact thing. So now you have these very, explicit talking points handed out to all Republicans that anyone who's coming out for this protest without evidence, without anything, that this is pro-Hamas, this is anti-American, this is domestic terrorist organizations, and everything else they're pushing. The reason this is so dangerous is because this is exactly, like literally inch by inch of what happened inside of Russia. That this is exactly how it started, to the point that anyone coming out with a blank piece of paper, can you imagine coming out with a blank piece of paper and being charged, for crimes for holding a blank piece of paper? This
Unbelievable.
is the point we're at inside of Russia. And interestingly, I'm writing by tomorrow or Thursday. I should have an article on the directive that Trump signed, ordering all the agencies to go. Yes, at the NSPM 7.
7, yeah.
Yeah, the directive he signed. So I finally sat down because, I looked at the directive earlier and I'm like, my God, this looks like Russia. So I finally sat down and actually pulled up the countering terrorism bill that was signed in 2002 by Putin, and then the foreign agents law that was signed in 2012. And the language is incredible. I mean, it is it's so similar. So I'm actually writing to show the
That's great.
blueprint of these two. But this is how it starts. When you start, taking protesters who are dissenting against a regime and then, demonizing them and then putting labels attaching, Antifa, terrorism, and whatnot, then you use the agencies, give them cover to actually go after these protesters and these NGOs and frankly, anyone who's pushing back against this insanity.
Yeah, that
And that's
Hamas
why-
language, sorry, finish it. But the Hamas language was started the other day with Kristi Noem at the first press conference they had about this new terrorism classification. And she's, busy saying that liberals are basically Hamas, equivalent to Hamas. It's ridiculous.
I actually worked on Hezbollah issues prior. I would love to send Noam with her little Barbie ice outfit to, see how Hezbollah operates and then come back and tell us, that the protesters on the streets chanting, some dressed in frogs and dinosaurs and unicorns, that these are people who have the same tactics. Because trust me, she spent, she'll in 20 minutes of being in Hezbollah's presence will, have out. She wouldn't survive.
She'd be nervous, yes.
Yeah,
Sure, she would like it.
to compare, regular Democrats and the country pushing back on this extremism with Hezbollah or ISIS or Hamas, I mean, it just shows you where they're going.
Absolutely. Our final story today brings us full circle to election integrity. Dominion Voting Systems, the company relentlessly targeted by Trump's election lies and conspiracy theories, has been sold to Liberty Vote, a new firm led by former Republican elections director Scott Leyendecker. The company has pledged to follow Trump's executive order on voting and promote hand-marked paper ballots, despite that executive order being ruled unconstitutional. The very company that Trump falsely accused of stealing the 2020 election is now under the control of a Trump-aligned representative.
I would call
Unbelievable.
this an emergency.
Hmm.
And I am frankly in shock that this is not being covered by media. I did not see, I mean, we have 24-hour news cycles on cable. You would think that they would take, at least 1 hour, say, to split between several shows to cover this because this is extremely dangerous. This is something we really need to push back on, and we can. I mean, this is something that we can really put the pressure, this has to be started immediately, but put the pressure on our state and local officials because ultimately states run elections. And if we suspect that Dominion, for instance, shouldn't be used, we should really, we need to speak now.
Well, the entire ecosystem needs to be reassessed. I mean, it seemed as like we're going to head into the next year's elections with a lot of questions around what Starlink can do, around what the power supply units can do, about what the Dominion voting machines, whether they got the right updates. Remember, there was a whole scandal around the updates. This is stuff we need to figure out in an emergency way because the elections are really around the corner.
They're 1 year away, which in election, timing is literally like tomorrow. We're very close and we really need to start working on this now. The one good thing I will say, um, that they clearly are projecting more than they have, because if they were confident, they wouldn't be pushing to gerrymander around the country. And now North Carolina is writing new maps. You have pretty much every Republican state, a held state, is being pushed to write new maps. So clearly, they will try with the technology. Clearly, they're not that confident because if they thought they had it in the bag, they wouldn't be bothering with pushing gerrymandering to, keep these seats. We need to focus on this because, frankly, this is the most important thing that is coming. And this is something that we need to focus on, and we need to all vote and overwhelm the system. And everyone needs to understand, sitting this out, or the price of eggs. Well, now they could blame Trump for the price of eggs and frankly everything. But sitting this one out is not an option because if we want to try to turn it around, we need to push back. And the only way you can push back is, with overwhelming numbers of people showing
And it
up to
takes
vote.
time. It's going to take a lot of time. When you're just figuring this out and then figuring out what to do to replace it and whatever, it's a lot of work this people have got to do. And it's going to be resisted in every red state for sure by any state secretary. That is the Trump Tyranny Tracker for today. Olga, it's so nice to see you at 7 p.m. every Tuesday and Thursday. And you're back on Wednesday as well because you've got your Julie seminar series that you're doing tomorrow night.
Yeah, we're already at the end of it. Time flies. And it's basically on disinformation and how to counter it, and, using tactics that Ukrainians, Estonians use. Speaking of Estonia, I just published an article earlier. For anyone interested in geopolitics, Russia has been ramping up their aggressions across Europe. And last week, a few days ago, there were little green men that popped up near Estonia. And the
Oh,
last time
no.
we saw little green men, that was when they invaded Ukraine in 2014. So for anyone interested in what's happening in Europe, because it does affect us, as much as Trump tries to tell us, what Russia does has nothing to do with us. But oh,
It's not
Finland.
really a hoax. It's not really a
Finland,
hoax.
yeah. Finland, also Russia has been making makeshift
Drones.
military things near Finland's border.
Oh, really?
So I mean, yeah, they've been escalating across everywhere. And there was a submarine that just also a few days ago popped up, that France saw, and France tried to say there were technical difficulties with the submarine. Russians came out, said, nope, no technical difficulties and whatever. Anyway, things are heating up in Europe. We might be heading for a war. The most dangerous part of this is not only that Russia would attack NATO countries, but that Russia and China are planning to simultaneously attack. So Russia would attack Europe, China would invade Taiwan, and that would leave a big
And
problem.
the Americans might be engaged in Venezuela, a bit too busy to be fighting any wars. This could be the situation we find ourselves in, horrifically as that is. It's so interesting what you were telling us earlier about the way the media only focuses on one thing. And, there's always just one story a day that they have to cover nonstop. And that's why we do the Trump Tyranny Tracker, because we can cover a lot of stories in a half an hour. You get a much broader a view of what's happening in the news. And it's why the Substack news ecosystem is so fantastic. It's really amazing how many great voices are emerging, and the amount of news that is pushed through Substack every day that you don't get on mainstream media is unbelievable. So no matter where it is or who it is that you support here on Substack, please support their work. And by sharing it across all these social media platforms, put it out as many times as you can. The hitting of the star of the hearts is very important, because that means the algorithm gives it higher value. But use that other little icon at the bottom right, which is the square with the arrow, to make sure that you share it across all your platforms and all your networks. It's really important that shows like this, but also anything that happens on Substack where independent news is involved, gets these voices out there, because those seem to be the only voices that are independent in the media ecosystem right now. And that includes Olga Lautman from TrumpTyrannyTracker.substack.com or unmaskingrussia.substack.com. And that is the Trump Tyranny Tracker for today. You can find my stuff at narrative.org. I even have a sign, Olga. You see it? There you go. It's too small.
You need to make it bigger. Come on.
I know. I was trying to be discreet. I'm going to come up with something else.
You need to have your website there. I see it, but you need to have it boom.
Okay, I'll work on a bigger sign. Olga's been bugging me because the spelling.
You finally got a sign, but you
now people know how to spell it. NARATIV.org. Thanks to everybody. Thanks for being here tonight on this new time slot for the Trump Tyranny Tracker. We'll be back on Thursday with another edition. And have a great night, Olga.
Have a great night.
Bye.
Bye.